Today we welcome Emma Maslen, author, angel investor and founder of inspir'em.
There are still a lot of organisations out there that think Med-Pic is something to be done to the sales team. It's something to be done to the sales leaders. Often, leaders are not in the room when their teams are taught.
In this episode, we talk about the difference between the hypothetical applications and the real life applications of the playbook.
And it sounds so totally ridiculous, but things like when you buy a house, there is a decision process, a paper process that you have to go through, probably the most annoying one that you could possibly go through. Well, actually, that's all part of the playbook. That's all part of qualification and understanding what's going on.
We talk about the importance of networking.
Don't go to somebody and say, I haven't got a plan and I have 2 hours, can you help me write a plan? That doesn't work. People feel like networking is about finding another job rather than being better at your current job.
And how it can have a transformational impact on everything that you do, whether that's to help your clients, to help you build champions, or to elevate your career. This is her playbook. This episode is sponsored by PGAI and Seller. Go and discover how these solutions can help amplify your sales execution. Check out the descriptions below. Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns. I'm Simon Koutis and I'm joined by my co-host Ollie Kune.
Welcome back to the show, everyone.
And it's with great pleasure that we introduce Emma Maslen. Emma, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
By way of an introduction, you are CEO and founder of inspir'em. And actually, that's where we want to start. We want to understand, why did you choose inspir'em as the name of your business, and how is that relevant to the work that you do?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me today. So why I went with inspir'em was I had worked for some great sales organisations over the years, and one of those being BMC. And it's really interesting how everybody talks about the playbook and, you know, all of the great best practices that you can have in the playbook. But what I found most curious was there were some people that taught the playbook, which they sort of gave you the playbook and told you to go and crack on with it. And then there were some people who somehow inspired you to get up every morning and do the very best that you could. And within that, the playbook was there. So I saw some very different leaders teaching salespeople to be the best that they could be over the years. And the ones that inspired you were the ones that stayed with you. So we started with inspir'em to inspire people first to do something different and better for themselves. And we just went from there.
It's interesting that when you talk about the playbook, there's obviously a hypothetical playbook, which is maybe the utopian, almost scientific, but there's so much more to it. So tell us a little bit about that. Just take us one layer deeper into some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I suppose we meet with a lot of people who have said that they've bought the books, they've read the books, and they're adopting Med-Pic and Med-Pic, and they're adopting the playbook and those sorts of things. And then when you get talking to them, you realise that actually they're not. They've just missed the point somewhere along the way. And I think for anybody that's worked for any of the big playbook organisations, you know, we all say that because we lived and breathed it for so long, everything we do every day is all about that playbook. And it sounds so totally ridiculous, but things like when you buy a house, there is a decision process, a paper process that you have to go through, probably the most annoying one that you could possibly go through to actually buy a house. Well, actually, that's all part of the playbook. That's all part of qualification and understanding what's going on. And so you see a real difference in the industry of people who have, you know, bought the books and read the books, and then the people who are really trying to understand how they can apply it to themselves and to their lives, to the deals, and go from there. And in fact, you know, even leaders do the same. They take some ideas from some of the playbooks and then they implement them with great force, thinking it's going to make a big difference. But actually, sometimes it needs some time to settle and understand it a bit more.
If you were to break that down, so obviously Med-Pic or whatever the playbook is, it can be a bit of a tick box exercise, right? So what is the difference between just following that and living and breathing it? How can someone that's never lived and breathed it understand what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, things that we talk about every day. To start with, if it's become a tick box exercise, you might as well just get rid of it because it becomes pointless. What it should be is it should be a framework to drive curiosity. It should be you're looking at letters, you're looking at data, and you're thinking, well, actually, what don't I know? What are the risks that are in deals, in my forecast, in my pipeline? Where are those risks? How do I do different? How do I mitigate those risks? So it's all about driving curiosity. One of the things that we work with a lot of companies on all the time is around some of the scorecards that are out there for Med-Pic. And it's amazing how many companies implement a scorecard where 100% on the scorecard is the goal. And yet, how can you ever get to 100%? Because we don't know how to buy stuff in our own organisations, let alone buying stuff in other people's organisations. So how could you have a perfect Med-Pic score? And I do think that, that's one of the examples of you've probably got it wrong if you're going down that road, because it's about continuously identifying risks and thinking about the curiosity and what questions to ask.
You use the word buying in someone else's organisation. That's quite a specific thing that you've just mentioned. Help us understand what you mean by that.
Well, so if you think about the champions that you're working with every day, you're trying to, help them, guide them, make it easier for them to buy. And again, this goes back to the Med-Pic scores when people say, I've completely worked out what the decision process is. I've totally got everything under control from a paper process perspective. My champion's got everything in order. Well, there's stuff going on in the world all the time. So how can you possibly have mitigated every risk that there is? So again, just making sure that you're asking all the right questions, continually asking those questions as well to make sure that you haven't missed anything or you're ready for any surprises that you might have.
Obviously, this is a big mindset shift, right? Mindset shift from it being a tick box exercise to being something that you truly believe in. How do you, as an organisation, as a person, start to help educate leaders on training that and being able to actually help shift that mindset?
Yeah. So in the training that we provide, when we go in, we consult with organisations and then provide some training. There's a few sort of core principles that we have to start with. The first thing is we don't do any pre-work for the training. We don't ask anybody to read any books. We ask them to just show up, and we start them thinking about, well, why do companies buy? And why do people buy? And what's the sort of psychology behind that? How do organisations even operate? And that starts with identified pain and implicate pain. And then you start thinking about business cases, you start thinking about personas, and you start to move through the letters. Whilst we teach all of the letters in one go, because that's usually the way that people start off their training, we tell people afterwards to just focus in on a couple and get really good at a couple for maybe a quarter or so, and then pick up the other letters as they go. Because what you find is M, I, and C, so metrics, champion, and identified pain, are usually the ones that people get wrong. And then the foundations of the deals are then really in jeopardy. So making sure that people focus in and sort of build the muscle around the letters to start with, get really curious about what's going on. And then over time, really start developing. I think back to the BMC days. Just because we were thrown into some medic training in one day, that didn't make us experts by any stretch. It probably took, a good year to really, I'm sure there's some people who say it took a lot longer than that, but I think it would take probably a good year to onboard people properly in terms of medic and Med-Pic.
When do you see the aha moment when that actual mindset shift actually happens? Is it through the application and continuous application? When does it actually happen? When is when do you see it happening?
I think there's probably moments for people. And unfortunately, some of those moments are when things go badly, for sure. And it's amazing how many people get champion wrong. We are humans and we want to believe people when they say I'm all powerful and I'm going to get this done for you. And we think, great, amazing, I've hit gold here. But unfortunately, a lot of people get that wrong. So then when your champions let you down and perhaps they're not the people that you thought they were, you usually get some moments there. Unfortunately, slip deals as well. The amount of people who say, papers in process, it's just going for signature in an enterprise organisation, possibly fraught with danger, and then you get a bit of slippage. And it's usually those painful moments when people think, oh, right, okay, maybe I need to tighten up a little bit here. But I would say they're probably the two ones sort of in flight. But then you see people when they're consistently hitting quota quarter on quarter, and then they think, oh, well, actually, this is the safety net that I needed. So, yeah, there's a couple of points there.
Just going back to the whole inspire piece, let's just go back to, I just want to talk a little bit more around the contrast in leadership. When is this done really well? When is this done really badly? And what's the impact that this has?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we really believe in is the training that we deliver. It's got to be a conversation. We got to talk about what are your customers doing every day. It's not going to be a preach, because if it's a preach, then that's not going to go well. Our trainers are all ex-revenue leaders, which makes things a lot easier, because we can then, live in the shoes that they're walking in every day. We know the deals, we know the companies, those types of things. But it's so also that you can have a dialogue. So when people are questioning, well, actually, is this really going to help me? We can talk about, well, have you ever had a deal that slipped? Of course, we all have, right? Have you ever had a champion that wasn't a champion? So you can sort of empathise with the situation and make sure it works. Where it goes badly, I would say, is there are still a lot of organisations out there that think Med-Pic is something to be done to the sales team. It's something to be done to the sales leaders. And often the buy-in from the executives isn't there, the buy-in from the leaders aren't there. Often leaders are not in the room when their teams are taught. And you think, well, this isn't going to go well because, you're teaching people a whole language, you're teaching people a playbook that you don't understand. So that's going to be a problem. So that's quite often something that happens.
In terms of the actual, so I've had the training or I've read the books. What can I do to take myself through that journey of transformation?
Yeah.
Is it just because it's easy for me to just go back to doing what I've always done. So how can I learn something that I don't know what I don't know?
Yeah. I think, again, it's about curiosity, and also you've got to play with it as well. And one of the things that we talk to people about quite a lot, and again, this was something from, other leaders that I've worked for over the years. Unless you say the words yourself, so you ask the questions yourself, it will always just be in your head and it's not reality. So again, you can learn theory, you can learn an idea about, is a champion, or how do I really implicate pain? But unless you can sit in front of a customer and actually play with that and say, okay, so what's the implication if you don't do something about that? What's the implication to who? How's that going to affect your business? And really start to sort of verbalize those words and get those out there. I think people don't make it their own. Quite often, the theory stays in people's heads and they're a little bit afraid to play with it. Now, at first, I think when you first swallow the Med-Pic manual, it probably comes out. We have customers who will absolutely see themselves in this. It comes out really clunky, and their sales reps are probably a bit awkward in the way that they're asking their questions. But they've got to get through that, right? They've got to find a way of making that normal and getting the questions out in a way that feels comfortable, that then it becomes part of their everyday. So how we would suggest that people do that is just start really small. Just ask some similar questions in every meeting that you have. Start to really think about how you're going to build that muscle.
Sorry, it's just as much about understanding why you're asking those questions rather than that you are asking those questions, right?
Yeah, it is. And also it's understanding that in a good meeting, you might get 3 to 5 really good questions out, and that's it. That's all you're going to get. Again, another thing that we see a lot of people almost with the Med-Pic sheet in front of them, and they're sort of racking through the list with the interrogation lamp out, and they're really going for it with their customers, rather than thinking, well, actually, I need to hear what you're going to say. I need to understand it. And then I need to think, is there another question I need to ask? So actually making sure that it's a dialogue.
Yeah. Because if everybody's learning from the same school, how do you ensure that, you're not coming across too scripted and, each of these customers are going through the same experience? Oh God, another Med-Pic question.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
How do you personalize that experience for the...
Yeah, I
for
mean,
the
there are
buyer?
some things, again, that we say to people, like, for example, don't walk into a customer and ask who the economic buyer is, because they have absolutely zero idea what the hell you're talking about, and you're probably going to get the wrong answer.
Right.
So, are you my champion? They don't know what that means. They don't know what the definition of a champion is. So there's some EQ about this for sure. You've got to make sure that you've got the EQ. But I think as well, it's thinking about the meetings that you're going into and what's the purpose of that meeting. I always remember Paul Cant gave me a little trick when I was working for him when I was at BMC, which was, okay, we're going into a meeting together. What's the most important letter of Med-Pic that we're going to get out of this meeting? And he'd write that letter in the top corner of his book, and he'd say, right, we will need to make sure that the one thing we get out of this meeting is what's the pain? What's the real pain? Who cares about the pain? And think about all of the letters surrounding pain, if you like. So the sort of interaction of it. And he'd be really focused on that to make sure there was only one thing that we were looking for. So you didn't start really going through a checklist.
My guess is you don't need to go through the full qualification process of Med-Pic in just one meeting, right? This is an opportunity to create more opportunity to go and see your customer.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to that point, we have a lot of organisations that work with us as well about the sales process and the sales stages. And discovery is seen as often by a lot of reps as one meeting. And it shouldn't be one meeting. We should be forever discovering what's going on. I mean, that's part of qualification. So, Med-Pic qualification shouldn't be in one meeting. Your sales stages aren't one meeting per sales stage. That's generally not how enterprise sales works. So you should be thinking about all of this as a sort of series of meetings where you're picking up new information, finding out something different.
This episode is sponsored by Seller. Seller provides a white glove treatment to every complex deal with their bespoke system, whilst ensuring you get the most value from your CRM for everyday selling. So when you are doing discovery, as the deals obviously start to progress, what are you trying to discover at that point? What is there a constant that you're looking to discover?
Well, certainly in the early stages, you're looking at identified pain and you're looking for metrics, because one of the things that actually we talk about quite a lot, just a little bit of a tangent, is quite a lot of salespeople forget to qualify it for their own perspective. So when you think about metrics, are you qualifying in yourself? So you're thinking about deal metrics, you're thinking about how big is the pain, is the customer interested, and actually what is this worth to me? So forget the customer side of things at the moment and just digging. Of course we want to do that in the early stages because pain and metrics are where it all begins. But also, is it worth your time? You're very expensive. Your organisation's resources are very expensive. Is this worth you actually spending the time and doing that? So that discovery stage for me, you've got to remember that it's a two-way dating process. It's not just about you trying to work out if the customer's interested in you. This is also about you working out, is this worth your time?
You obviously had a very, very successful and illustrious career in software sales. What was your journey to thinking about inspir'em and the reasons for setting up inspir'em rather than continuing in your journey in software sales and software sales leadership? What was the...
So I think a big turning point for me was, I'd worked for some big corporates. Mm-hmm. The last big corporate job that I had was I was managing director of SAP Concur in the UK. And whilst that was... it was an interesting role and I had loads of really amazing people who worked for me. One of the things that sort of turned my head was I started angel investing and I started working with female founders, really early stage businesses. And I actually just found it really fascinating that I think I'd taken for granted quite a lot all of the things that I'd learned over my career. And I was meeting with founders who were trying to put this stuff together from scratch. And I was thinking, well, we can shortcut a whole load of that process for you because there's people out there that have written these playbooks and they know how this all works. So that was the sort of turning point for me where I thought, well, what we could do is we could, help these early stage businesses. But within that transition, when I moved away from SAP, because I'd worked for BMC, there were lots of people who said to me, actually, could you come teach the playbook? Could you come and help us with this? We're not quite sure. We need our sales team to really apply this. Could you come help? So whilst that wasn't quite what I planned to do when I left SAP, and certainly this was supposed to be a 3-day-a-week job, it's not quite turned out that way. So what we do now is we work with really big organisations because the big ones still need help. we work with really small organisations as well. So we help everybody in between. So the small organisations get the benefit of all of that knowledge and help, but we do the big programs too.
What's the reality of working with founders compared to perhaps the perception of what? Because I think a lot of people try and go maybe or consider going into consulting. What have your experiences been working with founders?
Well, yeah, there's a couple of questions in there.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, to the word, to anybody that's thinking about going to be a consultant, it is a completely different industry. That is the first thing that I would say, because I think a lot of people think, I've been a successful salesperson, I've been a successful sales leader, therefore I can now go and consult. And absolutely you can, but it takes a while for you to work out, what are you offering, what are you doing, what are you charging? It's a whole different business model, it's a whole different network. It's, so I would say, because we see a lot of people, so we sort of call it the departure lounge, where people are thinking about going to consult, they come and try it out with us for a little bit, and then they think, actually I'm going to go and take a job where there's a bit of structure, because it's a whole different world. So definitely think about it before you do that. But certainly working with founders specifically, there is, or in any organisation, there's so much that you could teach, but there's only so much people can consume. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why when we do a lot of our training, we might do the training, but we'll say, right, just focus on this now for the next couple of months, because you can't consume everything. By the end of most training days, people are exhausted. They've got so much going on in their heads. They're thinking about all of their deals. They can't consume much more. And it's the same with founders. Founders have also got their businesses to run as well. There's a lot to think about. You need to give them one or two things to really focus on. And then over time, feed them more different things to look at.
Do you offer the same one or two things? Is it normally a common, starting point when working with these founders? Do you normally tend to find, let's just work on discovery, let's go and work on, what is the real pain you're solving for customers?
I think it depends on the business. Right. What you tend to find with a lot of founders of really early stage businesses, they're really grappling with how do I hire some salespeople who are not as good a seller as me? Mm-hmm. And actually there's, interestingly, I was working with a founder recently who, I don't think anybody could sell his company as well as he sells his company. Of course they can't, because he built the company, he knows everything about the industry, absolutely. But I think one of the things that he's come to realise is there are also professional salespeople out there. So he now realises that actually, whilst he's the most passionate person about his business, he's not a professional salesperson. So he's not thinking about what's the org chart, what's the route to money, what's the decision process, how are we going to get paper out the organisation, who are the partners that we should work with. But absolutely, put in front of a CTO and he could go and sell the dream, absolutely could do that. So I think it depends on the founders. But I would say a lot of founders really grapple with are all salespeople really rubbish? How do I hire great salespeople and cut through the bullshit?
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. So so I think they're probably the big things, is getting founders on those early stage sales structures, if you like.
Yeah. Obviously, talking about a founder-led sales approach, do you think that founders tend to lean more towards the features and benefits of what it is that they're solving, because they're very feature-led mindset individuals, would you say? Or would you say that they know the pain? Or do you think they go in there with a hypothesis that I understand what their pain is? Or is there any common thread there? I
think all founders are very different. I think you get some that are very feature function. But then this is also a little bit like what we see with introducing sales leaders and also executive teams into deals as well when they're bigger organisations. Quite often the trick where people miss is, where are the founders most useful? Where will they get the most interest? Where would they be the most amazing resource at what parts of the sales cycle? And it's actually just putting some structure around that, because what you tend to find is founders are very good at opening the doors to start with. They're very good in, perhaps if it's a very So if you think about things like cyber, for example, very tricky technical conversations in the middle of the sales cycle. And of course, they're great at the exec bit that's towards the end of the sales cycle as well. But often people don't write that down.
Right.
They don't think about what's the sales process, what resources do I need when, and where would be the best place to use those people. And it's usually just having a conversation with the founders and with the team around, where are the best times to introduce the founder in. So just getting a bit of structure. But it's the same with sales leaders. Quite often sales leaders walk with their salespeople into lots of different meetings, and they don't think about, well, actually, when am I most impactful? When can I create some theatre around the sale? So just having a bit of a step back and thinking, okay, how do we resource a sales process properly?
Thanks to our sponsor, Pipeline Generation AI, the platform that researches your top accounts, creates insights and assets to help you engage more effectively. Elevate your conversations and transform your pipeline with Pipeline Generation AI today. Want to just change gears slightly. I want to talk about something else that you're extremely passionate about, which is around networking, because this is something that you're really hot on. Tell us a little bit about why that's important and also where it goes wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent my entire life networking in different guises, I suppose. And where it all began for me was, so in my early 20s, I worked for Sun Microsystems and I used to run the ISV team for financial services. So it was a lot of events, meeting with a lot of people, kissing a lot of frogs, trying to get people onto the Sun platform, etc., and sort of really early stages of my career. And then as time sort of went on, I sort of entered lots of different networks, the angel investing network, obviously I'm in the sales network, enterprise sales network, lots of different places. And then what I found was when people would come to you for advice and they'd say, I'm thinking about doing this in my career, I'm thinking about doing that. The theme that I found throughout every conversation I had was that people just didn't have a network. They'd say, well, I'm interested in going into this line of work. And you'd say, who do you know? And they'd go, nobody. Or I'm thinking about getting promoted into this job. Well, who have you talked to? Nobody. Okay, right. Well, where I'd start with is you probably need to talk to some people, tell them that that's what you're interested in. And then it became a little bit of a labour of love for me, because when I was at SAP, I used to get asked to do a lot of business women's network events. And I specifically talk about networking, and people would say, you should write a book about networking. So actually in COVID, I did write a book about networking. But actually, when I've sort of come out the other side, and whilst I did it originally because of personal development reasons, because people would always come to me and say, can you give me some advice? And then again, it would be about networking because they haven't connected with anyone. I found that salespeople and sales leaders don't do it either. And it just becomes criminal, because you think salespeople are not networking to meet new clients, which they probably should. They're not networking to go and meet new clients within their clients, which is discovery, which they probably should. And then you think about sales leaders as well. They're not trying to get new ideas from the industry. They're not thinking about who they're hiring. They're not thinking about sort of peer-to-peer networking. And they should. They absolutely should be doing that. And the reason why I get so passionate about it is because often what happens is when they realise they've got a problem with networking, it's when they really need it. And they should have been doing it way before that.
So what is network? What's not networking, and what is good networking? So sorry, I'll ask the question again. What's bad networking and what is good networking?
Yeah, so bad networking. Oh, all the things on my naughty list, I would say. So bad networking to start with is phoning people up in your network when you need something. That is bad networking. Because that's not networking. That's phoning people up and asking them for something. Networking is all about, helping people within your network, thinking about them, helping their careers, helping their businesses, elevating, lifting people up. Somebody always once said to me, it's about putting things into the universe so the universe looks after you. That is what networking is all about. And it doesn't have to be a room of strangers with a warm glass of wine, just so you know. That's absolutely what I hate. It could be just connecting with people. And so good networking is about thinking about where you want to go, who are the people that are there, how can you talk to those people, understand, how they've got there, how can you help them, and then sort of plot your journey to go and enter those networks, if you like. That is sort of some of the things about bad networking for sure. The good networking, as I mentioned, is about making sure that you're purposefully doing it. Where do you want to go? Who do you want to meet with? Well, go find those people. Go talk to them. Most of them will actually talk to you, so you just got to ask them.
Who should you be networking with? What are the important buckets that you should be networking with?
I think it depends on what you want to do. If you want to, if you're trying to enter a new industry or you're trying to enter a new network, if you like, go find some people in that network. So if I give you a great example, so in COVID, we moved to Cornwall as a family, and I'd angel invested a lot, but very much in a London network. So I thought, well, this is ridiculous. If all the angel investing I'm ever going to do is in London, I need to find some people that are in Cornwall because I need to try and be home at some point. So I Googled angel investing Cornwall, and this guy came up who worked for a fund as part of the British Business Bank in Cornwall. And I messaged him on LinkedIn and said, hey, I'm an angel investor. I've just moved to the area. Could you signpost me to some different angel networks in the area? So I didn't ask him for a meeting. I just asked him if he could signpost me, given the fact that he'd publicly spoken about angel investing and networking, etc. And he was very kind, and he said to me, happy to have 15 minutes with you on the phone. We jumped on the phone, and actually now I'm very much part of that network. So he was very, very helpful in signposting. So that's an example of how you could do it. Certainly in the corporate world, you need to be networking, and that again doesn't have to be that you're going out for all the drinks and the dinners and all those sorts of things. Connecting with people, talking to people, your level, the level above, the level below as well, different departments, get a different perspective, because the trouble is we gravitate to people that have the same perspective as us often, which means that blind spots are still blind.
But I'm so busy. I've got deals to close. I've got so much going on.
Don't care.
So
Don't care. Absolutely.
So what should I be doing then? So should I be just reaching out to people or leveraging my network to get access to people?
Yeah. So when people say that, they say, I'm so busy, or, I haven't got any time, or those sorts of things. I say to them, then it's just not a priority. So, and that's okay. If it's end of quarter, then absolutely, you've probably got other things to do, and that's totally fine. But you've got to make time for it, because otherwise what will end up happening is when you do need it, it will take you so much longer. I was talking to somebody the other day who said to me that a really fantastic sales guy who has hit President's Club, every year that he's been in sales, amazing. But he's stuck in an organisation, and he doesn't really want to go anywhere where he doesn't know anybody. But he doesn't know anybody. So I could make it really easy and go, hey, here's 5 people you should go and talk to. But actually, he also needs to understand that he's got to go find those people. So how does he do that? Because that's a life skill. It's something we don't get taught. Go and talk to some people that you don't know. Ask for something. It's just like pipeline generation. That's all it is. Go and talk to some different people. So you've got to make time. And I say that to people all the time. You have to make time. And if you're not making time, then you just don't see it as a priority. You don't value it.
Yeah. And you've got to be thinking about all the different components of what your job is, right? So, for example, peer-to-peer networking amongst and creating groups of, people in similar sort of seats to you. If you're a first-line leader, build a community around first-line leaders. You're all suffering the same problems. You're all experiencing the same challenges. So share that opportunity with each other and try and build networking groups around that, right? So that would be your peer-to-peer side. From a job finding perspective, again, get involved with, if you're in early stage startups, be thinking about VCs, they're great community of, individuals knowing what's the next hot technology, etc. But you've got to be really purposely thinking about, okay, what are the different areas that I need to be networking, and who do I now go and network with from an influential perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't mean to say that you are collecting networks and you're going to end up so busy that all you're going to end up doing is networking. There will be some networks you drop because at some points in time, not because you devalue them, but just because at that point in time, they're not as useful as they were. Because maybe they're avenues you've explored and exhausted, and you've decided that you don't want to go down that road. A few years ago, I was working out I was doing some work in Asia, and I didn't have a network in Asia. So I built a network in Asia because that's what I needed to do to go and decide where we were going and which countries we were going to spin businesses up in, etc. I'm not currently doing vast amounts of work in Asia, so I'll keep in touch with those people and have some contact, but you don't have to be meeting with them every week. That's not how it has to be. So I think sometimes people see networking as being quite tiring, but I would say that if they see it as tiring, they're probably doing it wrong, because they feel like it's so much effort to be able to do that. But you don't have to do everything. Do the things that are important at those moments in time.
Yeah. What about thinking about your own strengths and what you can bring to others, for example? It's obviously another great way, because from a recruitment perspective, it could be a case that we're speaking to a first line leader, and should you ever need a back channel, should you need some sort of information, please feel free to reach out to me. I want to be here to support you. And I think lending that hand and lending that opportunity for people to reach out to you is a great way of really being able to build networks, and ones which are going to last. Yeah,
absolutely. And that is all part of networking. If you're going to put yourself out there as somebody that people are going to call to ask for help, then you sort of got to know that they're going to do that, and you need to make some time for that as well. But yeah, I mean, people are going to need a back channel all the time, whether that's hiring managers or people going to work for those hiring managers, for sure. I mean, that's this is one of the big things that I see with leaders is, particularly if you've worked in a large organisation, you've been promoted from being an IC into a leader, often you don't have a network. You don't have a network to hire. You don't have a network to have a back channel with different people. And, at some point, that's going to be a problem. So you're going to have to work really hard if you're going to stay in one organisation to make sure that that's not going to hinder your career.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because when you look at the CROs that are exceptional, the ones that really have made it to the top, they know the lay of the land.
Yeah.
They know all of the different groups, and in some capacity, they've probably helped people in each of those groups, and they've got so much capital to be able to then kind of call upon. And so that back channel and the rest of it becomes so powerful, and actually it's a real focus of theirs. Yeah.
Well, they understand that that's how they're going to hire people. I mean, if you look at any of the, like, for example, the McMahon-backed businesses, if you go in there as a leader, one of the first questions you'll get asked is who you bringing with you, right? So you best have trained people well, looked after them, made sure that everybody was very happy working for you. But also, you're probably not going to be able to lift a team up from where you were and take them. Obviously, there are some restrictive covenants for that. But also, you're possibly not going to do that because people have got their own lives. So you're going to have to dip into other networks and pick up people from other networks. So how do you do that? And certainly, if you want to work for those really fast-growing organisations, that's the first thing they're going to ask.
It's interesting. So if you think about leaders, they obviously focus maybe a lot of their energy on skill acquisition and building their teams. But actually, if they've got lofty ambitions, being narrow within that isn't enough, because that's not enough momentum to lift them. Tell us a little bit about, again, how that network, the lack of network, will restrict them from being able to kind of grow.
Well, you think about the other attributes that leaders need. So, for example, just general knowledge about what's going on in the world right now. We've probably had more crises, I would say, since COVID than, well, possibly not if we look back over history, but it feels like we've had a crisis like every quarter. There's been, lots going on. And just navigating what's going on in the world. So which countries are spending right now, which industries are spending, who's affected by tariffs, who's affected by what's going on in the US, who's affected by what's going on in the Middle East. If you have a really narrow view and you're not talking to your peers in the industry, how can you know? So if one of your reps comes to you and says, I've got 100 accounts and I feel like I'm getting nowhere with my accounts, and maybe they've got some industries in there that are really affected by what's going on in the economy, how can you help them if you don't know? So just having things, general knowledge, industry knowledge, those types of things. I think if you look at AI as well, AI is moving so fast now. There's so much that's changing in the world around what we're selling to customers, how we're selling to customers, how we're recruiting people. Lots of things are changing. You can't possibly be up to speed with all of that. So you've got to lean on your network a little bit to understand what they're doing. And I think sometimes, in some cultures, your peer network is seen as competitors. They don't have to be competitors. I mean, yes, they are competitors for talent, for sure, but you can't hire everybody. So you've got to have some friends as well out there. And I think really broadening your knowledge out to say, well, actually, what is going on in the world? We do quite a lot of leader dinners, actually. And the leader dinners are not there because people want to talk to us. We want people to be talking to each other because they can learn faster if they've got 20 other people in the room that are operating in different markets. So just really important, not just from a talent acquisition perspective, but just from a business perspective.
But that's it. I want to take this opportunity to ask you all very kindly to go and hit the subscribe button. Whether you're on YouTube, iTunes, or Spotify, it will mean the world to us if you could hit that subscribe button. It means we can continue to bring you great content and will ensure that you don't miss out on any of our great content. You spoke about potentially, the networking events, being quite tough. Just turning up to a networking event can be tough for anybody, right? Making friends and just having mindless conversations. You need to be intentional with this, right? And if it's and I think, setting up events and being able to facilitate groups and communities, sometimes you don't necessarily need to be the smartest person in the room on that, right? You don't necessarily need to do it, but bringing people together is also a great way of being able to network, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But when we bring people together, we usually get people to talk about what's one thing that you've achieved over the last year that you're really proud of, and tell us one thing that you'd like to achieve over the next year. Because then what that does is it tells the people in the room what they've done, so they can think, oh, actually, I'm really interested in what Ollie's done because I'd like to maybe go and do that over the next year. But then also they can think, oh, I'd like to help Ollie out because that's the next thing that you'd like to do over the next year. Also, I think with networking events as well, for people that find it very difficult, I say a lot of females find it hard, technical people find it really hard because it's very extroverted event. Not all of those. I know I'm hugely, it's a big sweeping statement, but generally we find people find it harder. But we beat ourselves up about, we think we have to go and talk to everybody in the room. You don't. Just give yourself a break. Right? Just say to yourself, I'm going to go to a networking event. If I have 3 good conversations with people, or look at the attendee list and think I need to meet with these people, I need to talk to Simon because he's got something really interesting to talk about. Right, well, I'll go and do that, and then off you go, and that's it. So you don't feel like you've got to do everything, and don't beat yourself up because otherwise you'll continue to hate those types of events. But again, networking doesn't have to be about events, though. It could just be about dropping somebody a line, like I mentioned earlier, go see someone and, go and have a 10-minute conversation with them. That is networking. It's connecting with people.
In terms of networking, Ollie used the word being intentional, but a lot of people don't know what they want to be intentional about. So why is networking also good for you to go and figure out maybe a direction that you want to follow?
Yeah, so, but that could be a direction in itself, which is, I haven't got a plan. I'd like to build a plan. Now, I actually wrote about this in my book, which is don't go to somebody and say, I haven't got a plan. Can I have 2 hours? Can you help me write a plan? That doesn't work. You have to go to somebody and say, hey, I haven't got a plan. I was wondering if I could maybe just have 10 minutes with you to just talk about what was the plan that you took? Or perhaps if I could just have 10 minutes with you to talk about some of the options that I've got to get your perspective or to see what you can hear when I explain those options. So almost using the networking opportunity to get a bit of clarity, that is then intentional because you've got some intention around that. If you want to go and try some things, say, I want to come and meet with you because I would like to have a conversation about this. I'd like to try that. I'd like to understand. If you ask people for a really small ask, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I've got a very specific question. Most people, particularly senior people, because they understand how mentoring works, it's a two-way thing, they get clarity too. They will do it. They will absolutely do it. And because they get value out of that conversation too. going back to your bad networking, other things on my naughty list, where it goes terribly is when people ask for too much time, or they're not specific enough. Or my absolute pet hate is when you give somebody time and then it goes into a vacuum and they never tell you how it went. So the amount of times I've had over the years where people said, oh, could you give me some time because I'm preparing for an interview? Months would go by and then you wouldn't hear it. And you reach out to them and say, how did you get on? And they go, oh, I didn't go for it in the end. And they just didn't give you any feedback at all. And the trouble is, in the next time you ask people then for that, maybe you ask the same person again, they probably won't do it. So, you need to make sure that it's a two-way street. You're being really respectful of people's time. You probably get to anybody for 10 minutes.
Obviously, the pandemic brought video, a lot of video and Zooms and that form of interaction. What's your thoughts on that? Should it be in person? Should it be over Zoom?
I don't think we're ever going to get away from, there's a lot of virtual stuff now. I think there are still a lot of people making excuses about the fact that you can't go see people in person. I think get over it. I live in Cornwall and we're in London today. Yeah. I'm here. So, make an effort. And you've got to make an effort because that's how you make connections with people. So you need to have a balance, because if you are asking people for 10 minutes, you may not get that face-to-face. A lot of executives as well still quite like to be on the phone. So you don't Zoom them, ask them for 10 minutes and give them a ring while they're walking around the garden. They're often quite happy with doing that. Thing I would say, though, is something I've realised over the years is not enough people look into the camera when they're talking on Zoom. They're wandering around. And that actually is to do with the tech, because what happens is actually as humans, we really struggle to continue focus into a camera. You need to do that because the person that's on the other side is looking for you looking at them. So it's very hard to do that. It's very tiring. But if you are going to connect with people over Zoom, just make sure that you're looking at them when you do it. That's certainly something to think about. Yeah,
something I always do is I'll always pin to the person that I'm on the interview with, and I'll always hide my own, because you do find yourself wandering eyes and and looking elsewhere on screens and stuff, don't you? So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As someone that's maybe early on in your career, I might not have anything to offer that person. But why is it important that I still have the intention to bring value, and how does that kind of show up?
Yeah, I think, firstly, don't sell yourself short. I actually hear this a lot when we're talking about economic bias, actually, as another tangent. People say, oh, the economic buyer won't meet with me because I'm a lowly salesperson. Same with somebody low down in their career and they feel like I can't go and have 10 minutes with somebody very senior because why would they talk to me? Well, there are some reasons why they would talk to you, actually. You are an expert in your field, even if you are still early in your career. You're on a learning journey, which is a perspective that they don't have anymore because they are much later in their years. They've got more tenure, and your discovery is a thing that they've lost. So you will have a different perspective. I very much learnt this when I was working for BMC. I had the great pleasure of having Andy Harwood as my mentor, actually. And I once said to him, why are you mentoring me? Because I'm like here and you're here. And how's that? And he said, because you've got a whole different perspective. He was on the solution consulting side of things, SVP solution consulting. I was on the sales side. He could hear a different perspective, but also, I was of a different age and a different tenure. So I had a different outlook on the things that I was looking for. So I think you can very much sell yourself short, but you do have a different perspective, and that perspective might just be that it's fresh. So that's okay. But also remember as well, these senior people are still trying to hire people and, work out what's new and all of those sorts of things. And if you're younger in your years, you may well find that you've got that perspective. Who's entering the market? Who's good at your level? Who are the ones to watch? Who's going up in their careers? What tech's out there as well. So I think it's important that as you build your network, you need to understand that network has to be available then to other people. So that's what you're going to give back. And you don't have to give it back today, but just know that at some point you're going to have to give it back.
It's interesting that a lot of the people that listen to this series, so when our guests come on the series, a lot of people obviously receive a lot of messages. So there are people that are proactively doing that, wanting to connect. And actually, a lot of these leaders, they like a trier. They like someone that's putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
And it does actually help you stand out. So there's a lot of encouragement there for that.
Yeah, there is. Although I would just say, again, just to go on the bad networking, on the naughty step again, but if you do that, just make sure you've done your research, you've got something to offer, that you're being very specific about your ask. Because you do, I mean, I had this when I was at SAP. You'd have a lot of people that would say, oh, it'd be great to get a coffee sometime and, talk about your career or something really non-specific. And I actually wrote a blog about this a while ago, which was, what's the cost of a cup of coffee? That's actually quite expensive, depending on how long your cup of coffee, where you are, and how, who you're having that cup of coffee with, because it's very expensive on their part as well. So just be really specific about their asks. I always think asking people to signpost you to stuff is a great in, because it's not a big ask. Because most people will be happy to say, look, there are 3 networks there. That's how you enter those networks. And give people almost a little bit of a test to see, well, did they enter those networks? Did they try? And then you'll find that they'll then give them a bit more time, because they'll think, oh, right, well, actually you did what I suggested. So fair play. Let's give you some time.
And that's where the follow-up comes in, right? Which is what you spoke about earlier. Making sure you follow up. I did that network. It was really good. This is what I came away from it with.
Absolutely. Met some great people. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or even, chances are, if they're suggesting those networks, they're probably ones that they're in, and you'll see them there anyway. So that's the thing to be thinking about. Yeah.
I think networking also comes in, and you don't know what you don't know, right? And sometimes by putting yourself out there, you are increasing, the stuff that you may not necessarily be aware. We experience it all the time in work, right? We were talking about this, in the last session that we did around, going through a recruitment process, entering yourself into an opportunity to be able to go and have a chat with a senior leader, because at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so, and you don't actually know what may necessarily be going wrong in your current seat until you start talking about it, because you're so fixated on your current job and what you're doing that, at the end of the day, how do you know if there's any, barriers or, problems in your current seat?
But then that's the curious thing I find about coaching. So actually my entrance into this world was when I left SAP. I actually went to Henley and I studied coaching, because I'd had coaching. So I worked for Chris Baker at SAP, and he was amazing when I first took the MD's job there. He got me an executive coach, and I at first didn't understanding how coaching worked. I would go into this room and I would felt like an indulgent 3 hours where I would get to talk about all of my problems, which I just felt like first of all, I didn't have time to do that. And secondly, it just felt like it was an indulgence. But actually, after a few coaching sessions, what I realised was I was working through all the things that were in my head, and I was working out, well, what was going wrong, what was happening with the team, what did I need to change, what did I need to do different, how was I being perceived, what was happening to the business. And I really saw that as very valuable. And then I went and studied coaching because I just found it to be really useful. It amazes me today how many leaders we have in the sales industry, and actually individuals as well, that don't see value in coaching. Because, and again, this goes back to, you are isolating yourself because you're not thinking about how are you perceived, what's going on in your world, what's going on with your teams, why are team members behaving the way they're behaving, challenging your thought to think, well, actually, am I actually thinking about this enough? Quite often when things are going wrong, particularly in sales teams, we resort to driving people harder rather than, again, stopping to understand, well, actually, what's going on. And what's going on is coaching's a really great safe space to do that, but we don't do it enough.
So we've spoken quite a lot about external networking, but quite often, the internal network that we've got in the current organisation can lend itself to, or a good way to find, different networking pockets around you. Have you had an experience in that? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's something that we don't do enough when we're very busy with our day jobs and in our teams. We don't think about the networking across the broader organisation. But again, I think one of the misconceptions about networking is people feel like networking is about finding another job rather than being better at your current job and just getting really good at the things that you do. When you work for large organisations, quite a lot of how you get things done is by networking. If you think about challenges you might have with a product or support or those types of things, as a salesperson, if you understand who's the head of customer success, who's the head of product support, are there engineering teams that you can maybe hook your customers into? Just really valuable things for your customer. So again, thinking about networking as they become more gifts you can give them to your customers externally. But in the meantime, you then get a perspective, which is what products are coming out, or how do I get my customers onto the beta teams, or why are we developing a product in that way? How do I get something done or answered for a customer so that I don't feel frustrated? So networking doesn't have to be about finding another job. It could just be about understanding more in the organisation so you can get things done.
But we often see this, and we had another session on this, which is being overlooked from promotions, right? Again, if you find yourself too focused on the only job that you're doing, how does the broader business actually understand what your aspirations are and where you want to actually take your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're doing this will be after this goes out, but we're doing a Women in Sales webinar tomorrow, and the webinar is on executive presence, and we're very blessed. We have a couple of hundred women that are joining our webinar tomorrow. But specifically what we're going to be talking about tomorrow is pie theory, which is all around how do you get promoted and what are the things that need to be looked for. And actually being seen and exposure is such a big proportion. I can't remember exactly what the statistics are. It's around 60 to 65%. It's that high that if people don't know who you are, and in fact, this was one of the things that I learned in my career is I came from a very working class family. I worked really hard throughout my career, and I thought that life was a meritocracy. I thought if I worked really hard, I thought people would notice what a hard worker I am and it would all be amazing. And then I realised that actually that wasn't the case. And obviously being female, it's also a little bit different as well. And then I realised that actually a lot of it was about exposure. It was about, and not exposure in a bad way, but in exposure in how can people think of you if they don't know you? They've got their own busy lives going on. So again, this goes back to networking, which is if you don't know who these people are that are creating the opportunities, providing those opportunities, how can they think of you? And that's not about bravado or, you being some sort of, sales influencer. It's about people understanding what you've achieved so they can think of you.
Obviously, looking outside, we've spoken about internal networks and external networks to some capacity. Is there any other avenues or angles that you've been able to use from your experience or call upon from your experience that gives you good access to good networks?
Yeah, so a couple that I'd recommend having a think about. And again, you've got to work out this for yourself. And it's almost like doing a pipeline reconciliation plan. You need to do a spider diagram and sort of work it all out. But there are some slightly off the wall things to have a think about. So one of them I would suggest is things like executive search. When you're an individual contributor, you know what recruiters are because they're the people that phone you up and they say, hey, I've got a job. Do you want to come and have a job interview? As you get a bit more senior, what you don't realise is there are these executive search firms that are sort of above that. And that's about, they're the people that are developing the job recs with organisations, and then they're very much paid for their network expertise and sourcing people in the market. So executive search can be a really interesting source of connections because they know a lot of people in the market. Again, they're industry peers that you can be connected to. So they're really useful people. But again, if you're worried about or you're slightly scared by the whole recruitment side of things, think about other types of networks. Quite often when we're talking to salespeople, we talk about industry bodies as another way of networking. Institute of directors, maybe the Institute of IT professionals, those types of people. There's lots of nice networking events you can go to there, or maybe informational events where you can understand a little bit about what your customers are thinking, or so you can just have a different network, different perspectives. So think about the other types of people that are interacting with your peers, your superiors, but also think about the networks that are interacting with your customers as well. Go join those networks, because at least then you'll get a different perspective than the perspective you have today.
I suppose I just want to kind of frame where you are now in terms of, as a serial networker, your role now in the network. You're a connector. You're a connector of people.
Yeah.
So how does that? What does good look like? So just kind of summarize that in terms of where you are now and the impact you're having on the industry through that.
Yeah, so I take great pleasure in connecting people to other people and then seeing those relationships develop the life of their own, if you like. And then I see things sort of years later where I think, oh, well, actually, that was the reason why I connected those people. Only for my own badges of honour, not for any other badges of honour. But, I get great pleasure in that. And I think that's a lot of, again, this goes back to why senior people mentor as well, because, we get a lot by giving back to people that are, in a different position to us. So very much enjoy connecting people and helping people with that. The one thing I would say, though, and again, I just keep bringing it back to this, is just make sure that if you are asking people for things, that you are giving back into that network as well, because that's the only way that this grows, because otherwise you're always going to be reliant on one connector connecting everybody. Imagine if we had lots of connectors connecting everybody. LinkedIn say that everybody's connected now by about 3.5 moves, something like that. Well, actually, if everybody was actively connecting, it'd probably be a lot less than that. So I think everybody's got to play their part.
Yeah.
Well, it was 3 people that recommended you to us, so obviously you've helped a lot of people along the way.
Amazing. I want to know who the third was. I know who 2 of them are.
It was
Kira McQuaid.
Shakira,
and there was one more. No,
I'll have to have a think.
I'll have to have a think.
Yeah.
But this is the point where we reflect on what's been an amazing session. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's interesting, in the line of work that you do, you obviously, it's really easy to see a lot of people just evangelizing this very hypothetical tick box playbook, because it's consumable, it's easy to follow. But actually, what I've really enjoyed about today is advocating that it's not about that. It's about understanding and applying it in a way where you can understand the mindset. It's more around the mindset of the playbook and understanding why you're doing what you're doing, not just the tick box playbook execution that we've seen so many people advocate, and getting inspiration and leading through inspiration and helping people understand why they should be doing what they're doing, and not just kind of beating people over the head with a load of metrics and saying, follow that. And I think the other profound takeaway is obviously networking and really putting yourself out there, turning up and trying to bring value, have the right intent, and how this can completely transform the world can completely transform your career trajectory and everything you want to achieve. So a massive thank you to you for joining us today. Thank you once again. And it's been fab having you on the show.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you very much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. So to all our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you've heard, please do subscribe to our various channels on iTunes, Spotify and YouTube. All the links will be in the description below, and we look forward to welcoming you back for another session very soon. Goodbye.